Mm. Uh, Good morning, good afternoon. Um, I'm sorry I cannot be with you in Shanghai. I will speak about culture, cyber culture, and semio culture. Actually, I start from the old age of the students' movement in the 60s, when the process of becoming of counterculture started in a very political way in the United States, in Europe, in China, in very different ways. In a book titled From Counterculture to Cyberculture, this book, Frederick Turner speaks of the history of the students' movement of the 60s as an anticipation of the technological transformation we are accustomed to call digital revolution. In this book, you can read a talk of a student named Mario Savio, an American of Italian origin, who spoke in the city of Berkeley in December 1964. You know, it's the beginning of the war in Vietnam, and the American students are demonstrating against the war and against the utilization of science, technology in the imperialistic aggression against the Vietnam people. Mario Savio, in the text that I will quote now, speaks of the relation between intellectual work and the machine, a sphere of capitalistic society. Listen to his words. There is a time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can take part. You can't even passively take part. And you have got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, on all the apparatus, and you have got to make it stop. And you have got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you are free, the machine will be prevented from working at all. December 2, 1964. This is the day when Mario Savio spoke these words that for me are an anticipation of many experiences, intellectual, political, artistic experiences I have been living through in the following 60 years. The crucial theme of the countercultural movement that spread in the West since the 60s, particularly the student movement of 1968, the crucial theme is the relation between knowledge, technology, and capitalist exploitation. The words of Mario Savio refer specifically to the subjugation and the subsumption of knowledge by the machine. But they also refer to the subjective side of it. They also refer to the mental suffering that this subjugation implies, provokes. Remember, Savio spoke those words in 1964, and in those words is, in my opinion, in my humble opinion, in those words is inscribed the deepest question of our time. Who is the owner of knowledge? This is the main issue of the Italian movement of autonomy, self-organization of knowledge, autonomy of technology from capitalism. The idea that political action, art action, have to be intended as possibilities of autonomy from the capitalist domination of the machine. In the late decades of the past century, however, the neoliberal transformation has resulted in a defeat of that autonomy project. The digital net that in the 90s could be seen as a space for equality and freedom under the control of big private corporations has been turned into a cluster of techno-linguistic automatisms that shape the protocol of human communication and also the cognitive hardware, the brain of the human race. But let's go back to the 60s, the 70s. In the 70s, a new generation of scholars and militants I was part of discovered a text that was unknown before, a text of Karl Marx titled Grundrisse. In this work, particularly in the chapter titled Fragment on Machines, Marx uses the concept of general intellect that better expressed the networked activity, general intellect. This link between machine, cognition, and salaried labor is at the center of the theoretical elaboration of the Italian post-operaism, as we call the leftist Marxism in Italy in the 60s and in the 70s. So the concept of general intellect is crucial for the description of the process of automation, replacement of manual work with machines, but also the process of subsumption of intellectual work in the sphere of production. According to Marx, the machine is the product of intellectual activity, of the general intellect. But it is also a potential for the liberation of men and women from alienation, from exploitation of salaried labor. You see, general intellect is in a contradictory position. On one side, it is the expression of subjectivity, creativity, but on the other side, it is a tool for the exploitation of human labor. In the Marxist tradition of the Italian movement, the intellectualization of labor was viewed as a condition for the emancipation of human life from capitalist exploitation. Then technology evolves, and from the industrial machine, we have to understand this passage to the digital machine that is changing the landscape of social relations during the 90s. In the 90s, when digital technologies opened the way to the creation of the global network, I thought with my colleagues and comrades, I thought that this was the beginning of a process of social emancipation from salaried work. Actually, in 1994, with the University of Bologna, I organized in my city an international meeting called Cibernauti. My intention was to anticipate the deployment of the internet from the point of view of the emancipation of labor, of the full implementation of the potencies of the general intellect. I thought that the evolution of the net could make possible the expectation of social equality and the primacy of social interests. I was wrong. I was wrong, and the following history of the net has demonstrated that technology's evolution is not a separate sphere. The evolution of the net depended and depends on the social forces that have the power to shape it. And the effect of the digitalization of social activity has been the creation of what I call semio-capitalism. Capitalism based on the production and circulation of science that results into the exploitation of the nervous energy of cognitive workers, of poets and engineers, of artists and technicians. Semio-capitalism puts neuropsychic energies to work, submitting them to an ever-accelerating speed, compelling cognitive activity to follow the rhythm of networked productivity. As a result, the emotional sphere linked with cognition is stressed to its limit. This is something that Marx could not imagine, that we in the 60s and in the 70s could not imagine that the new technology could provoke an acceleration of productivity, but also of the subjective side of production. And when I say subjective side, I'm not only referring to knowledge and social activity. I am also referring to the erotic sphere of social activity, to the emotional sphere of social activity. So, in the process of creation of semio-capitalism, not only our productive and communication activities at stake, but also our intimate psychic ability to elaborate is at stake. Cyberspace overloads cyber time, because cyberspace is an unbounded sphere whose speed can accelerate without limits, while cyber time, the organic time of attention, of memory, cannot be sped up beyond a certain point, or it cracks. Our brain, our mind, our body cannot be obliged to live in unbounded acceleration. Otherwise, we we live in a condition of growing suffering. Actually, the collective mind is cracking. This is the phenomenon of our time. The social mind is collapsing under the stress of hyperproductivity. An epidemic of panic, depression is spreading throughout the circuits of the social brain worldwide. In China, like in the United States, in Italy, like everywhere in the world, the social brain of the new generation is cracking under the effect of the acceleration of the precarious activity of our brain. Marx spoke of overproduction, meaning the excess of available goods that could not be absorbed by the social market. But today, it is the social brain that is assaulted by an overwhelming supply of attention-demanding goods. The social factory has become the factory of unhappiness. The assembly line of networking production is exploiting the emotional energy of the cognitive class. I wish to pinpoint this problem of the organic limits of mental activity, which is often eclipsed, forgotten, by an emphasis on the limitless potential of technology. The acceleration stresses the limit of error capacity, and the consequences are visible in the spreading psychopathologies that mark the existence of the last generation. This expression is very strong. In Europe, in the United Kingdom, many young people define themselves as the last generation. We will not create, we will not give way to another generation because life has become unbearable under these conditions, under this environment and the psychopathological condition. Life does not deserve anymore to be lived. So we decide to be the last generation. Psychiatrists speak of a spreading epidemics of mental suffering, of panic crisis, of depression, decline of desire among youngsters, fall of birth rates. These are symptoms that need to be interpreted. The old psychoanalytic frame of interpretation of suffering has to be rethought. It's no more a problem of individual neurosis, like in the Freud's time. You remember the disease of civilization, this kind of idea that neurosis is an individual effect of repression. No more neurosis, no more individual neurosis, but mass psychosis. This is the new pathological effect of the hyper-acceleration of capitalism. Nervous systems act as receiving terminals. They are sensitive to semiotic activation throughout the entire day. What emotional, psychic, existential price does the constant cognitive stress of permanent cognitive electrocution? This is a word was invented by the French philosopher Jean Baudrillard. I don't know if you read Baudrillard in China. I strongly suggest to read Jean Baudrillard because in the 80s, he was writing about phenomena that now become evident to everybody, the effects of pathological acceleration, the effects of semiocapitalism. The acceleration, the network technologies, the general condition of precariousness of labor, and the dependence of cognitive labor, all these induce pathological effects in the social mind. Saturation, attention time, compression of the sphere of emotion and sensitivity, a steep increase in manic depression, spreading suicide, the last generation of workers. The colonization of time has been a fundamental issue in modern history in general. The anthropological mutation that capitalism produces in human mind and in daily life has, above all, transformed the perception of time. Info workers, the cognitive work that we are as artists and as engineers in their collaboration. The cognitive workers that we are exposed to a growing mass of neural stimuli. The acceleration leads to an impoverishment of the experience. More information, less meaning. More information, less pleasure. Pleasure is disappearing when information is too fast. When we are obliged to follow the rhythm of advertising, of permanent excitement, of desire, we become unable to live pleasure, to live a pleasurable relation with the infosphere and with nature. Sensibility is activated. Sensuality, sensuousness is slow, deep, intense elaboration, sensual elaboration becomes impossible when the stimulus is too fast. So a process of desensitization is underway at the point that electronic cyberspace is intersecting with the organic cyber time. Cyber time is organic. Cyber time is the time of our body, the time of our emotional brain. Cyberspace is permanent acceleration. So the prospect of individual subjectivation and of social subjectivation has to be reframed in this context. And a series of radical questions arise. Is it possible today to envisage, to imagine a process of collective subjectivation, of social solidarity? Is solidarity possible in the conditions of precariousness, of widespread precariousness, of widespread acceleration of our cyber time? Is it possible today to imagine a movement in the sense of a collective process of intellectual and of political transformation of reality? Is it possible today to forge social autonomy from capitalist dominance in the psychoeconomic framework of semiocapitalism? I have no answer to these questions. These are the questions that we have to ask individually and collectively in our time. This is, in my opinion, the crucial theme of artistic research in our time. Art is the sensitive and sensible research of a pleasurable relation between our mind and the environment in which we live. Art is all about rhythm. The rhythm of our body, the rhythm of our brain, and the rhythm of the surrounding physical and information environment. This is the subject of art always. Deleuze and Guattari speak of this in their works, especially in their last book, the most beautiful book of those philosophers. What is philosophy? They ask at the end of their life. And they speak of chaos and cosmos. Chaos, what is chaos? What is that painful condition that we live many times in our time, in our age? What is chaos? Chaos does not exist, actually. It is not there in the world. I never met chaos. You never met chaos. Chaos is the relation between our brain, our mind, our body, and the excessive speed of the informational and emotional stimuli that we are obliged to suffer. Chaos is the relation, and this relation has a rhythm. It's all a problem of rhythm. The rhythm of this relation is painful because our body cannot find pleasure in a precarious, accelerating bombing of our sensibility. So we need to find the rhythm. This is the issue of contemporary art. A chaosmotic rhythm. Chaosmotic, it is a word created by Félix Guattari. Chaosmos is the ability to elaborate chaos according to a new rhythm that we create thanks to our poetical and artistic activity. You know, cognitive workers today are, in my opinion, the only possible subject of a process of social recomposition. They are the only possible subject for the creation of a new internationalism. I use this word, which is so crucial in the history of the past century. This word that has been crushed at the end of the past century. Internationalism, the only condition for peace and for creation, has been defeated at the end of the 20th century. Neoliberalism and nationalism. Neoliberalism and fascism are the same thing. National liberty has destroyed the planet's environment. We live in a planet that is less and less livable, less and less habitable. We are living in a planet that cannot be inhabited by human beings. We live in a planet where war aggressiveness is spreading. Look at what is happening in the Middle East. Look at the genocide that the Israeli country is waving against. Look at what is happening everywhere in the world. Why? War is taking the upper hand all over in the planet. Why so? Because our brain has been destroyed by the neoliberal acceleration, and because internationalism has been cancelled in favor of the war of everybody against everybody. We cognitive workers, we poets, we engineers, linked together in an alliance which is political and existential. We have to be able to find a way to a new kind of international solidarity. We have to be able to disentangle our creative work from the tanks of financial competition and military. The planet, you see it, is headed towards a chaotic war. Only cognitive workers, intellectual workers, artistic workers are the social subjectivity that may create a new cosmos beyond the present chaos. Thank you very much.
感谢 Bifo 的精彩演讲，下面是问答时间。第一个问题：如果艺术以及其他知识工作者也在重复病态符号资本主义的行径，我们作为知识工作者可以做怎样的自我警惕与反抗？
Should I reply now, or we wait for more questions? What do you suggest? I go. Not about the answers. So, yes. How can we resist? This is the question. Actually, I do not have a political answer to this question, because I think that politics is an old art, an old technique that is no more useful today. So, what is politics? Good question, right? What is politics? I answer with an Italian philosopher of the 16th century called Niccolò Machiavelli. He told that politics is the ability of a man, of course, not a woman, the prince, to submit the unpredictable fortune, the unpredictable variation of events. So this was politics during the 5 centuries of the modern times. The ability of power to submit the multifarious variety of the events. Now the events have become too fast and too complex for the human will, the political will. So political will is impotent. Impotence is the real character of politics today, of will today. So what? Resist. How can we resist that? No, not politically, but artists know a way. Because, in my opinion, today, resistance is essentially a subject that belongs to artists, psychoanalysts, and engineers. Their alliance is the condition for a possible emancipation from the hell that we are living in. Poets, because poets have the ability to perceive rhythm. Psychoanalysts, because they have the ability to deal with psychological pain. Engineers, because they have the ability to change the machine, to redefine the functioning of the machine according to the suggestions of the poet and according to the needs of the social mind. Actually, I do not propose a political revolution. I do not believe in it. I propose a collective act of desertion, of withdrawal, of abandonment, of quitting. Quit war, quit work, quit the market, quit everything is obliging you to live in the condition of semio-capitalism, of psychological dependence. This is my answer.
第二个问题，您如何看待政治性抑郁对人们情绪带来的影响，以及人们尝试避免政治性抑郁时便不去关注政治新闻与信息的做法？我们如何关注当下社会和政治？如何来夺取属于公民在社会控制的权利，以便形成世界公民
？Well, you know, I use the word precariousness to define the present condition in which we live. What is precariousness, actually? Precarious labor is the new form of social economic relation that has been implemented by the neoliberal capital. But and you know what precariousness means, a relation, a precarious relation between the worker and the enterprise, the permanent condition of uncertainty about tomorrow and so on. But I think that precariousness is a word that is not limited to the world of production, the world of work. Precariousness is referring to, as you say, with a sentiment of permanent anxiety, the perception of being permanently pushed towards an acceleration of the infosphere and the perception of being dependent on the rhythm of a machine that you cannot control. This is precariousness. The sentiment of being drawn into a whirlwind of artificial needs and so on and so on. this sentiment of precariousness is fueling aggressiveness in many cases, or passivity in other cases. And frankly speaking, I think that those people who have grown up in the decades of the neoliberal acceleration in the West and in the East, those people who have grown up in the 80s, in the 90s, in the first decade of the century, many times are lost, have lost any possibility of reinventing themselves, and are eaten by this anxiety to be in the market, to be... I don't expect anything good from the past generation. I expect something from the ultimate generation, from the millennial generation, from those people who have been born inside the digital work. An Italian philosopher called a woman called Luisa Muraro speaks of the relation between the newborn and the machine. And she speaks of the relation with the mother, with the voice of the mother, and says nowadays we are living in a time in which a new generation has learned more words from the machine than from the voice of the mother. You know what I'm talking about. The millennial generation is a generation of people who have learned more words from a machine than from the mother. They are living the authentically post-human condition. And they will shape a new human way to deal with this condition, with this post-human condition. Only them can do this. Only them can invent a world which is beyond the history of the humankind. Only them. I know they can fail. We can be unable, you and we can be unable to overcome the anxiety that the rhythm of the machine has provoked into our bodies and our minds. Maybe in that case, the humankind is finished. Yes. Yes, we are going toward extinction. Extinction is the horizon of our time. Extinction can be provoked by the climatic collapse, can be provoked by the political aggressiveness that leads to the atomic war, which is a possibility. Extinction can be provoked by the suicide, the political, military suicide of the humankind. Can we escape this prospect, which is very realistic nowadays? I say it's not so easy, but the possibility exists. And this possibility is much more therapeutic than political, much more artistic than political, much more technological than political, because only the marriage between poetry and engineering, only this marriage of the poet with the engineer can reshape the very structure of technology. And the structure of technology, as you know very well, has become absolutely crucial in the very creation of subjectivity. So if technology is, as actually is, in the hands of the military, in the hands of the financial system, we are dead. But if social subjectivity of artists and engineers is able to reshape the machine from scratch, we can reinvent our future.
感谢 Bifo 教授的精彩发言，以及对于2个问题非常 thought-provoking 的解释。让我们再次以热烈的掌声感谢 Bifo 教授。